Okay, so get ready, because we're going deep into the world of Russian high fashion.
Ooh, fun.
But this isn't just like your typical runway shows and designer labels.
Yeah.
This is a story about like international intrigue, whispers of power,
Yeah.
and that line between ambition and influence and maybe manipulation.
You know what I find so fascinating about this whole thing is this idea
Yeah.
that it really kind of forces us to look at that age-old question of artistry and success,
Yeah.
but against the backdrop of politics, particularly in a place like Russia.
That's what we're trying to figure out, right? Like,
Yeah.
are these fashion icons, are they visionaries, or are they something a little less glamorous?
Yeah.
We're talking about the rise and fall of what some are calling the Russian fashion mafia.
Woo!
And we've got some juicy sources for this deep dive.
Oh, yeah, lay it on me.
We're talking academic articles, social media posts, even some like really in-depth biographical stuff on the key players.
Okay.
This is going to be a wild ride.
It all starts with three women who became absolute style icons after the fall of the Soviet Union.
It's okay?
Miroslava, Duma, Ulyana, Sergeenko, and Elena Permanova.
Oh yeah, I've heard those names.
And their stories are fascinating. They're almost like modern-day Cinderella tales.
Wow.
They went from these very humble beginnings outside of Moscow and rocketed to the top of the fashion world.
Talk about a glow up, right? It's so interesting.
Like a post-Soviet glow-up.
And Miroslava Duma, I mean, she was recognized by Forbes and Financial Times
Yeah.
as like a major power player in the industry.
Absolutely.
They called her the force of the fashion industry.
Now that is serious clout.
Right.
And that phrase right there, the force, I mean, that's loaded.
It really is.
Was she a force for good? Was she a force for change?
Or was she a force for something else entirely?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's where things get a little dicey.
It's a little more complicated.
These women, they weren't just stylish.
No.
They had connections to some seriously powerful figures like Alexander Lebedev.
Now he's a former KGB agent turned media mogul.
Oh, wow.
And his son, Evgeny.
Okay.
He owns some major British newspapers and even has a peerage.
Okay, wait, hold up. Former KGB media empires, British politics?
Mm-hmm.
This is already sounding like a spy thriller.
Yeah, right.
But then, like any good story, there's a twist.
Yeah.
The 2022 Ukraine invasion.
Oh, right.
Everything changed.
Absolutely. It sent shockwaves through their world.
Yeah.
I mean, Duma, for instance, just vanished from the public eye after posting a black square on Instagram in solidarity with Ukraine.
Wait, really? Like, poof, gone.
Pretty much.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So did the other two, did they do the same thing?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Sergeenko, she kept her fashion line going.
Okay.
But Permanova, she stayed active on social media, but she's been very, very careful
Yeah.
to not post anything political.
No black squares for her.
Not a one.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, high fashion is a global game, right?
Poor.
You don't want to alienate a huge part of your customer base.
Makes sense, but it makes you wonder, what were they really feeling? Yeah.
What kind of pressure were they under?
Were they genuinely trying to figure out this incredibly tricky situation? Or were there bigger forces at play, maybe even pushing them towards silence?
Maybe. And then there's Lebedev.
Yeah, what happened with him? Did he side with the Kremlin, or did he make a break for it?
Well, some sources suggest that Lebedev actually might have distanced himself from the Russian government after the invasion.
Interesting.
But those details are pretty hard to verify.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
So we've got these super successful women right at the center of the fashion world.
Yeah.
But they're also tangled up with former KGB agents and media giants and international political drama.
It is a lot.
It's giving House of Cards, but like with way better outfits.
Right. And that brings us to the big question here, the central mystery. Were these women brilliant entrepreneurs who built their empires on talent and charm? Or were they even unknowingly pawns in a much bigger game of power and influence, maybe orchestrated by people like Lebedev or even the Kremlin?
Right. Were they visionaries, or were they what some might call useful idiots? Yeah, it's a good question.
It's also blurry.
It really is. This isn't a simple black and white situation.
No.
It's a puzzle where the pieces seem to change depending on how you're looking at it.
Yeah.
And to make it even trickier, there's not a lot of hard evidence to go on.
Right, which just makes it even more interesting.
Yeah.
Like that classic question, can you really separate art and fashion from politics.
Yeah, especially in a place like Russia where those lines have always been kind of fluid.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, look what happened to Duma after that black square post.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder what the real stakes are here.
For sure. And keep in mind, this is really just one layer of the story.
Right.
I mean, we've seen how these women rose to the top, their connections to the powerful, and the impact of the Ukrainian invasion.
Yeah.
But there's just so much more to explore, so much below the surface.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yes.
Let's dig into their individual stories and see if we can untangle some of those threads in this Russian fashion mafia mystery. First up, Miroslava Duma. From digital media darling to a sudden and unexplained disappearance. What happened?
Duma's story is really fascinating.
Yeah.
Her rise was like a rocket. She went from a pretty humble background to becoming this fashion influencer, a successful entrepreneur, a regular at all the most exclusive events.
Yeah.
She really seemed to embody the aspirations of this newly wealthy post-Soviet Russia.
She was like the ultimate it girl, right?
Yes.
Magazine covers, hanging out with celebrities, named a young global leader by the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, she had it all.
It's like she was living a real-life fairy tale.
It really seemed that way.
So what led to her downfall? Was it all tied to the 2022 Ukraine invasion?
Well, the invasion definitely seems to be the tipping point.
Okay.
But there were some cracks in her carefully crafted image even before that.
Oh, really? Like what? Fill me in.
Well, you remember that phrase, the force of the fashion industry?
Yeah,
It's pretty open to interpretation, right?
it is.
Some people saw it as a sign of her incredible business savvy, but others saw it as something else, maybe a manipulation or even a connection to the Kremlin.
So even her success was making people raise an eyebrow?
Exactly.
Yeah?
I mean, when you reach that level of influence, people are going to start asking questions.
Yeah. How did she get there?
Right, and then there were the controversies.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Years before the war, Duma was accused of both racism and homophobia
Oh, wow.
because of some, let's just say, ill-advised social media posts and comments.
Yeah.
She did apologize,
Okay.
but the damage was done.
Right?
These incidents kind of hinted at a potential dark side to her glamorous persona.
So a little grifter peeking out from behind the gifted facade.
Possibly, and then after the invasion, that black square on Instagram and then silence.
Yeah.
She basically withdrew from public life. No explanations, no statements, just gone.
Wow, that is a dramatic exit.
It is.
It almost adds to the mystery surrounding her.
Right.
Makes you wonder, was this a voluntary withdrawal or was she forced into hiding? Was she afraid of repercussions from the Russian government or from those powerful figures she was associated with?
It's all speculation at this point, but what we do know from the sources is that some of her social media posts have been deleted.
Oh, wow.
And her last Instagram post, as of January 2023, was from February 2022, right after the invasion started.
So she's become this enigma wrapped in couture.
Yeah, kind of.
Here's someone who was once so visible, so vocal, and now completely silent.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating turn of events. What about Ulyana Sergeenko and Elena Permanova? How did they react to the invasion?
Their responses were different, to say the least.
Okay, how so?
Well, Sergeenko has continued to design and showcase her fashion line.
Okay.
It seems like she's choosing to keep her work separate from politics.
Interesting. So she's focusing on her business, maybe trying to ride out the storm?
Yeah, it makes sense in that world of luxury fashion. It relies on international buyers. Alienating a big part of your market isn't exactly a smart business move.
Yeah, I get it. And then you have Permanova.
Right. She's stayed active on social media, but as we said, she's been very, very careful to avoid any kind of political statements.
Yeah, no black squares for her.
Nope.
It seems like a very calculated choice.
It does, almost like she's trying to walk a tightrope.
Yeah, it makes you think about the pressure they must have been facing. Were they getting pressure from the Russian government to stay quiet? Or were they just trying to protect their brands and their businesses in a world that was changing so quickly?
It's hard to say for sure.
Right? It's a complex situation, and it's hard to know what was really happening behind the scenes. But these contrasting responses from Duma, Sergeenko, and Permanova, they really highlight how the invasion impacted their lives and careers, just like it did for so many people within Russia and around the world.
Absolutely.
This whole story is a reminder that fashion, especially at this level,
Yeah.
it's never just about clothes.
It's not.
It's connected to power and politics and those global events that really shake things up.
It's all intertwined, and it brings us back to that question.
Yeah.
Gifted or grifter?
Were these women brilliant business women, or were they instruments of someone else's agenda? Or maybe a little bit of both.
It's possible.
I think that's what makes this whole story so captivating.
It really is.
It's not black and white. There's so much gray area, and it makes us think critically about influence and ambition and the compromises people make, especially when they're caught in the middle of global politics.
You've hit the nail on the head. This deep dive isn't about putting labels on people.
Wow,
It's
yeah.
about exploring those nuances, the complexities, and the different perspectives that shape this whole intriguing tale.
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated, let's not forget about Alexander Lebedev,
Oh, yeah.
the former KGB agent and media mogul lurking in the background.
Right.
We know he had ties to these women,
He did.
but what exactly was his role?
Yeah, good question.
And what about those allegations that his son, Evgeny, was a little too cozy with certain British politicians? Did those relationships play a part in this Russian fashion mafia saga?
We need to find out.
Let's unpack that as we continue our deep dive.
Ah,
Okay, so we've got the rise of these it girls. We've talked about their connections to power and the impact of the Ukraine invasion.
right.
But now let's talk about the mysterious Alexander Lebedev,
Yes.
former KGB agent
Mm-hmm.
turned media tycoon,
Yeah.
father of Evgeny Lebedev, who, as we know, owns those influential British newspapers and even has a peerage.
It's a lot.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a real-life game of chess, but with, like, way higher stakes and way better fashion.
Absolutely. I mean, Lebedev is a fascinating figure. He really represents that bridge between that old world of Soviet intelligence and the new world of global media and finance.
Yeah, and his connections to these women, especially through his son Evgeny, who's currently in a relationship with Elena Permanova,
Right.
just add like another layer of intrigue to this whole Russian fashion mafia story.
It does. It's like something out of a spy novel.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we know that Lebedev was a KGB agent during the Cold War, but he's also known for being a critic of Putin.
Yeah.
How do we explain that?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, some sources suggest that Lebedev's criticism of Putin was maybe strategic,
Okay.
a way to distance himself from the Kremlin, particularly after Russia took Crimea back in 2014.
Okay.
But others see it as genuine opposition to Putin's regime.
So calculated distancing or a true change of heart?
Who knows?
Tough to say for sure. But what about his relationship with his son Evgeny?
Right.
There's been a lot of controversy about Evgeny's peerage and his close ties to British politicians.
Yeah, especially Boris Johnson.
Right. Some people even think that those ties played a role in the decision to make Evgeny a peer.
And those concerns were definitely amplified
Yeah.
by that whole thing where Boris Johnson admitted to meeting with Alexander Lebedev in Italy back in 2018.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Without any aids or security.
Wait, he met with a former KGB agent during a major international incident and didn't bring any officials with him?
He did.
That seems a little risky.
It does, and Johnson insisted that the meeting was purely social.
Okay.
But a lot of people, including members of parliament,
Yeah.
questioned his judgment and were worried about potential security risks.
Yeah. I can see why.
Some even suggested that Johnson might have had something to hide.
It's a tangled web for sure.
It is.
I mean, we've got fashion and politics and international espionage and a little bit of family drama thrown in for good
So
measure.
that's all connected.
It's almost impossible to separate the personal from the political in this story.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah.
It forces us to really think critically about the information we're given, question motives, and acknowledge that the truth is often hidden somewhere in the shadows.
So what's the verdict? Was
Mhm.
this Russian fashion mafia just a group of talented women who got caught up in a world of power and influence that they couldn't escape? Or were they willing participants in a larger scheme, maybe orchestrated by people like Lebedev or even the Kremlin?
We may never know for sure,
Well-
but I think the real lesson here is that the world of high fashion, especially in a place like Russia, is deeply intertwined with politics and power.
Yeah.
These women's stories are a small example of the bigger forces at play.
Yeah.
They highlight the complexities of ambition and influence and the choices we make in a world where those lines between personal and political are becoming more and more blurred.
It's a good reminder that behind all the glamour and the runway shows and the magazine covers, there are often hidden agendas and motives that are way more complicated than they seem.
Absolutely. Sometimes the most stylish accessories are the ones you can't even see.
That's a good point. It makes you think if even the world of high fashion can be a stage for international intrigue, where else might these hidden forces be operating? What other parts of our lives are being shaped by power dynamics that we're not even aware of?
That's a great question to think about.
It really is. It's something we should all be considering as we try to understand this increasingly complex world.
For sure.